Hey, so I need to tell you about the wildest thing that has ever happened in American history that most people have never heard of. We're talking about one dude, one homemade armored tank, 13 buildings completely destroyed, and $7 million in damages. And the government literally considered launching a military missile at a guy in Colorado. And somehow nobody else was hurt. This is the story of Marvin Heemeyer and the Killdozer. Okay, so before we get into the crazy part, you gotta understand who Marvin actually was. He grew up in South Dakota, a super small town, like farm country, the kind of guy who would take apart an engine and put it back together before breakfast. He joined the Air Force, got stationed in Colorado, learned welding and heavy machinery, and just kind of never left. He fell in love with the mountains. By 1992, he settled down in Granby, Colorado, a tiny mountain town, like 1,500 people. He opened up a muffler shop, and honestly, he's doing well. He's smart, he's got a good job, he's got friends, and people like him. But here's the thing about Marvin. He took stuff really personally, like really personally. And over the next 12 years, a bunch of stuff happened that just broke him. Alright, so here's where it gets complicated, because depending on who you ask, Marvin was either totally screwed over by a corrupt local government, or he was a guy who completely lost perspective over problems he couldn't solve. And honestly, I think it's both. So here's what happened. Marvin buys this land on the edge of town for a shop. It was cool, but then a concrete plant gets built right next to him, and it's basically landlocks his property, cuts off his access road, and Marvin goes to the town council like, hey, this isn't fair. You approve this without thinking about how it affects my business. And they basically go, yeah, not our problem. Then the town comes at him with a sewer connection requirement. They want him to hook his shop up to a municipal sewer system. Marvin thinks it's unnecessary. He refuses and he gets fined. He fights back, files complaints, writes letters, and shows up to meetings. He even starts his own little local newspaper at one point just to call people out. And every single time, nothing. He feels like they're laughing at him. Now look, were some of his complaints valid? Probably yeah. Small town politics can get grimy, but people who knew him say he also had a way of seeing conspiracy everywhere, like stuff that could have been sorted out with a lawyer or a negotiation. He turned into a full-blown war. And by the early 2000s, Marvin Heemeyer had decided he was completely done trying to work within the system. So he went to his garage and he started building something. Okay, this is the part where I need you to really appreciate what this man actually did. Starting in 2002, Marvin takes his Komatsu bulldozer, already a massive 65-ton machine, and starts turning it into something straight out of a video game. He works completely alone, in secret, for a year and a half. He welds thick steel plates all over the outside of the bulldozer. Then he pours concrete behind the steel for extra reinforcement. He mounts cameras on the outside hooked up to monitors in the cab, so he can see where he's going without ever opening a window. He builds literal gun ports into it so he can fire weapons from the inside. And then, because this man was committed, he installs air conditioning, food, water, and a toilet in the cockpit. When he's done, this thing weighs 85 tons. It is a homemade tank built by one guy in rural Colorado. And here's the thing that blew my mind. A few people actually came by his shop while he was building this and just didn't notice anything suspicious. And Marvin took that as a sign from God that he was supposed to go through with it. He also left behind some audio tapes, and on those tapes, he says he believed God personally blessed him for what he was about to do. On June 4th, 2004, Marvin Heemeyer climbed into that cockpit and sealed it shut from the inside. He was never coming back out alive. It's around 2 in the afternoon. People in Granby are going about their day, and then they hear this enormous crash. Marvin drove the dozer straight through his wall at his own shop because the door wasn't big enough, and he started rolling through town. And his targets were not random. Every single building he hit was connected to someone he felt had wronged him. This wasn't chaos. This was a list. First stop was the concrete plant, then Granby Town Hall, and then the local newspaper that he hated, a former mayor's house, a bank, and the library. One by one, he's just ticking off names. Meanwhile, cops are losing their minds. They're firing at this thing, eventually about 200 rounds total, and nothing is even scratching the cab. Then they try explosives. It doesn't work. They literally got on the phone with the governor about possibly using an Apache helicopter with Hellfire missiles or an anti-tank missile team. Let that sink in. They were considering military anti-tank weapons for a guy in a bulldozer in Colorado. A deputy actually climbed on top of the moving bulldozer, trying to stop it. He couldn't do a thing. Now, and this is important, a reverse 9/11 system managed to warn people in buildings before he got there, almost certainly saved lives because the library had kids in it minutes before it was hit. But don't get it twisted, this wasn't safe. 11 of those 13 buildings were still occupied right before he hit them. He was also shooting from inside the cab at propane tanks and power transformers, trying to cause explosions. The whole thing lasts 2 hours and 7 minutes. It ends when the dozer falls into the basement of a hardware store and gets stuck. Can't go forward, can't reverse, just stuck. And with police closing in and nowhere to go, Marvin Heemeyer tragically took his own life inside the cockpit. It took them over 12 hours to cut through the armor and reach his body. So the damage is insane. 13 buildings, $7 million. The whole business district of this tiny mountain town just wrecked. Some of those business owners spent literally 7 years trying to rebuild. But here's where the story gets a second chapter, because while Granby is picking up rubble, the internet is doing something really weird. It starts making Marvin Heemeyer into a folk hero. Forums, websites, and eventually social media started painting him as this martyr, the little guy who finally snapped and fought back against the system. What this really is a tragedy for the town and honestly for Marvin too, because somewhere along the way, a smart, capable guy with a real-life resentment ate him so completely alive that he couldn't see any way out except this. Let me know, guys, do you think he was a hero or a villain? I want to know where you guys land on this one. This comment section is going to be wild, and I'm here for it. If you want to go even deeper, there's a documentary called Tread on Netflix from 2019. And if you're new here and you're into stories like this, subscribe because this is literally all I do.